symbols, these letters, and then they had a cursive way of doing it, and then I was starting to put together like a way to communicate with them through the symbols, and that's what they wanted me to do. Instead of the telepathic stuff, they wanted me to sketch and think the symbols to talk to them, and then that's how they would talk back to me with the symbols. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so if I was a good laboratory mouse and I cooperated, then they would answer. So one particular evening, I knew I had done well with some ambiguous puzzles and symbols, and I could tell that they have no emotions. If they do, they're not emotions that I can understand. But I could sense that they were pleased with it, so I screamed out, who are you? And, of course, I gave them a snotty answer after they told me because I didn't like the answer. And it was so corny, but they said, we're star people.
Okay.
Star people. That's what I said. Star people? You're star people? I said, I'm a people. You're not a people. You can't. The star part I can believe, but people, you are not people. So I still wasn't embracing alien ways, clearly at that point. So they referred themselves as star people. Another time during the course of that first 6 years, bearing in mind while all of this was going on, Art, they would do some bizarre emotional experiments to see how I would react to things like killing in particular. And also semen extraction was always part of an abduction experience. It's like, you couldn't go home without, donating semen, whether you liked it or not. So that was a constant with this also.
There are many, 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 including my best friend Whitley Strieber, of course, who tearfully related that. He was very embarrassed by it. And so I guess it seems to be integral to the abduction experience, and there are many people who draw an inference from that the motivation behind all of this is somehow genetic, that it's related to genetics.
Well, yes, it is, and different types of ETs or extraterrestrials or grays, in my experience, better than 90% of my contact or experience have been with what are commonly referred to as grays. 3 or 5%, or a little more than that, have been what are scaled beings, and people commonly refer to them as reptilians. But the genetic part is there in their agenda. But I observed, and these worker beings kind of intrigued me because those are the ones with the huge eyes. Now the grays have bigger eyes than we do, but not nearly as huge as these workers. And I surmised over the years that these worker beings were created. They were half biological and half robotic, and I surmised that the biological material was coming from us. They were actually farming us for raw materials to make those things. That's at least one part of what they do.
All right, you moved from the punishment-reward phase where you were totally resisting and very, very obviously angry to a point where you began to cooperate with them. Is that fair?
That's right, because I knew I could always go home quicker. And that, you could call that part of the reward thing. So the more I cooperated, the faster it would get over with, and I can go home. So yes, that's fair.
How hard was it after an experience to make the transition? I mean, my God, every day you had to come back. You said it was happening 2 or 3 times a week. You had to come back, and there was your wife, there was your business, there was the real world, and you had to make the transition back to the real world. How hard was that? It wasn't
a good transition in those first 6 years at all. And I relative to the whole, when you look at the big picture, yeah, I handled it well, but relative to those first few years, no. I wasn't adjusting, and I was, like I said, I had a buffer there where I could. I had one business where I had a partnership with a gentleman and his wife, and they were trusted friends, and they ran that aspect of the business because I couldn't even. That was in North Carolina, where I couldn't even become part of it anymore. Where it consumed me, and and I went through all kinds of phases with this. because I never was one for alcohol or drugs or anything like that. Sure, I would socially drink and things, but I started drinking, and it was not like me to drink like I was. And I mean, I got to the point where I looked like I stopped eating. I lost, I dropped between 35 and 50 pounds, and, I was only at the time like 180, and I dropped 35 to 50 pounds from that. I looked like, at my lowest point, I looked like Howard Hughes, I think. I kind of joke about it, but like Howard Hughes did with the fingernails and the long hair and, not shaven and all that. And I woke up one morning, and I said to myself, man, I looked at myself and said, that's it. I am not going to let this happen. I'm not going to let them do this to me. That's it. And I brought myself right back up almost immediately within a few weeks or a month, and didn't turn to anything to numb me. In other words, to try, because the more I numbed to myself, the harder it was on myself. If you follow what I'm saying. No, it wasn't good. It was awful. It was terrible. It was traumatic. And again, the MO with this thing is isolation. So I was isolated. Nobody believed me.
Jim, what did you do? Did you first go to your wife with this?
Well, I touch on this a bit because I learned real quick that they had an involvement with her, because from time to time I would see her in an abduction experience way in the back of the room or in the corner somewhere, and it would be a glimpse. But she was, at the time, when I would mention it to her or confront it with her, and it fascinates me today when I think about it, and she won't argue it, but she gave these like program responses to any of my questions. And, now this is the woman I lived with, this is the one I slept with, this is the one I was in love with, this is the one I held, this is the one that knew me intimately. And I would look at her face and say, Teresa, I know you remember seeing me. And then she would be herself for like a brief moment. It's kind of scary what I'm telling you. I mean, things did get a lot better with this, but this is the stuff at the beginning. And she'd look at me like herself and start to say, yeah, I saw. And then she would stop, and then she would give me the same like programmed responses. I wouldn't know about anything like that. She would even talk funny. And if I pressed it further, my life became more difficult than it was. So she became unlike herself. And, everybody has their moods and their ways, and, that are up, they're down, and so forth. But the downs were not like her. And so I learned pretty quick, hey, her way of coping is it's not happening.
Denial.
Denial. And there was, I think, a little bit of, programming there, so to speak, from them. And again, Art, the idea was, and as you say, I like the way you put it with your experience in the service and how boot camp works, and you kind of put even more of a clarity for me on it, because it was to keep me isolated, keep me in fear, and keep me in confusion, in a sense, to mold me to the way they are, because they are different. They are certainly not like us, and that was all part of the way that thing worked.
Okay, then you went to others as well. I assume that you went to some business colleagues or friends or your family, or
yeah. I mean, I laugh about it now, and they just said, what really appalled me, I think, and what really hurt me the most was anybody that knew me knew that I was straight, and I tell it like it is and how I see it, and and so on, and I don't make things up. And it was just, they reacted in a way that was, I couldn't believe. They just wouldn't take any of it as being possible.
Right.
And then, so it was my brother, I believe. Was it my brother who said to me, you know something, Jim? He said, as long as you don't talk about this stuff, you're perfectly fine. And that's how everybody sees you. So that was something that I took to heart, and I stopped talking about it to my family. Well, of course, now they see it completely different. And Jim was okay, just as long as he didn't talk about this stuff.
All right, Jim, hold it right there. We're already at the top of the hour. Boy, this is flying by. Jim Sparks is my guest. He's an abductee, obviously a very honest one, and one who remembers just about everything. Listen to what's going to unfold. I'm Art Bell.